All right, I'm wrapping up my series this morning. Can you hear me now? And if you haven't heard me now, you won't ever hear me now. So 5 weeks is enough. No, it was an attempt. But I have loved this series. I have learned a lot. I hope you guys have learned something. At least this has been one of my, I don't know if I always say, at the end of my series, I always say it's one of my favorite series. Because I always feel like if I don't enjoy the series, I shouldn't be preaching it, because then there's no reason for you guys to believe you'd enjoy it. But I think this has been one of my favorite series, because this has been one of my struggles. Looking through COVID, COVID changed a lot, but one of the biggest things it really created was this challenge to go, I don't know how to speak to people who disagree with me. How do we do this where we don't end up just in this constant battle of where it feels like we're fighting against people nonstop? How do you actually communicate with people? And so that's been a battle that I face. Not that I'm a massively public figure, but in my small little part of the world, I get to have some influence and I get to say some things and people ask me questions. How do you respond well? How do I not use the little influence that I have to just do exactly what everybody else is doing? How would it look to actually respond the way Jesus responded? And so it's been awesome. I've really enjoyed it. We're wrapping up today. I'm excited about a new series that we're launching next week. And we'll get to that during the week and we'll put out some stuff. But for now, Matthew 28, 18 to 20, you shouldn't have to turn there because we've heard this so often. But I want to start here this morning. I had two routes I wanted to go this morning. I was either going to go and I was going to finish everything I was going to say about the series, or I was going to give a bit more of a pastoral message. And I've chosen pastoral. I think mainly just because most of us are mourning. And so it was a tough night. The Lord is good, but he was not last night. And it just is what it is. I saw Vladdy praying during one of the innings, and the Lord did not respond. And so I don't know what to make of it. We're still working through. So it'll be a pastoral message. We'll release a podcast this week. There are some stories, like the Netflix story and some of those that I started and I never finished, and I do want to finish. So we'll release a podcast this week and our weekly one, and we'll kind of update that. Matthew 28, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, says Jesus. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And we've spent a lot of time there, and I want to spend this morning just on this last little verse. And it says this, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. So the question I have for you this morning is, what would change in your life if none of the circumstances changed, if nothing that you're currently facing changed, if the only thing that changed was that you were convinced that God was with you? This last week, so I've been processing this all week, and this last night we were at small group, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this publicly, but we're a forgiving place, and so this isn't even about me and Rick and hugs and stuff. It has nothing to do with that. So Rick, just relax. Where are you, Rick? How are you? Abe gave us homework yesterday. And so he's posted this online. I don't know if you guys saw, but he's released, Abe Wall has released a line of like encouragement cards that he's put together. So he's got some artwork and some verses. And so what he gave us last night was a card with a verse on the inside. And he said, I want you to pray about who to give this to. And then I want you to give this to somebody. And the verse inside was Isaiah 41, verse 10. It says this, so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and I'll help you. I will uphold you in my righteous right hand. And so I was thinking about that, and we ended small groups early so we could go watch our idols play. And so then I was watching baseball, and if you watched Chris Bassett come up, you would see in the corner of his hat, he had Isaiah 41:10 written on his hat. And so there's all these little things throughout the week and all these little reminders that God is with us. And so I know this is going to be, if you're new to faith or if you're like, I don't even believe, I just heard these guys had good coffee, which I know is a lie. We have decent coffee, we're working on it. But if you're here and you're like, I don't believe yet, the idea of the God of the universe being with you just must sound so foreign. And I get that. Sometimes even because I'm a pastor, like I live in this stuff, and sometimes I wake up and I'm like, man, it's crazy what we believe. I believe that there's this God out there, and then he sent his son, and the whole thing sometimes just feels like, is this a movie, or is this actually real life? And so if you're struggling with some of this, and as we go through the sermon, it's okay. I totally get it. But I want you just to humor me this morning. But what if there was a God, a creator, and that creator actually knew you, and that creator was actually with you? Would it change anything for you? So, I want to start with a story. This is way too fast, but it starts around Genesis 41. I want to read the story of a guy named Joseph, one of my favorite stories in the Bible. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's phenomenal. So Joseph was a teenager, and he was a work of art. He was a teenager who, by the sounds of it, believed very strongly in himself and really irritated his brothers. And his brothers did what most brothers do. They sold him into slavery. And sometimes you read these stories and you're just like, oh man. Okay, so this guy's 17. He has this dream that his brothers are going to one day, brothers and fathers are going to kind of bow down to him. There's this whole thing. And his brothers are like, this is enough. And so like, should we kill him? And then some slave traders come driving by and they're like, nah, let's just sell him. So they sell this guy. And he ends up going to Egypt. And in Egypt, he gets sold on a slave block, however that worked, to a guy named Potiphar. And the scriptures say the strangest thing. And it says, and God was with him. Isn't that strange? I think that's strange. And then it says, so then when he was a slave now, so from free to slave, he gets bought by somebody, he gets put to work in somebody else's house in another country. And while he's there, it says everything prospers. And he's a bit of a studly guy. He works hard, takes care of himself. And the master's wife takes note and goes, I would like to have an affair with you. And so he does not do it. Says, no. And she says, oh yeah. So she grabs his robe. And this is why I always think you should really tie your robe tight if you ever get in a situation like this. Because she grabbed the rope and it flung off. And he ran out robeless. And you know what he said to her? Why he didn't want to have an affair? He said, how could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? You were free, then your family betrayed you. They sold you as a slave. You were taken as a slave and sold to somebody else. And in that house, somebody tries to take advantage of you. You stay true to God. He doesn't show up. He allows you to be sold, to be bought, to be falsely accused. And now, when she couldn't get her way, she says, well, he tried to sexually assault me. So now, her husband goes, okay, well, I'm throwing him into prison. And it says, and God was with him. And so in prison, he sits. He sits for 1 year. And then 5. And 7. And somewhere around year 10, 11, there's 2 other guys that got put in there. And I don't know exactly why or whether it was good reason or not, but Pharaoh, they had done something. Pharaoh wasn't impressed, so he throws them in prison. And so one day he sees the 2 guys, and they're a little bit off. And he's like, what's up, boys? And they were like, well, we had a dream. And back then, again, some of you guys had dreams last night. Most of you look okay. Our dreams, we don't assume mean anything. We had weird coffee last night. We ate Mexican burritos, something. We had weird dreams. In their culture, because there were so many gods and they believed that the God spoke to them, one of the ways they believed was if you woke up and you remembered your dream, it probably meant something. And so they were telling him, he's like, we've had these dreams, we don't know how to interpret them. And Joseph was like, well, listen, tell him to me, I'll bring him to my God. You're 11 years into being a prisoner for a crime you did not commit after you were sold to slavery. And you're like, hey, I'll bring him to my God. I don't know, 11 years is a long time to be in prison and still be like, me and God, we're tight. And so God reveals the dreams to him. And Joseph is like, hey, listen, I got good news and bad news. Who wants to go first? And he's like, all right, you're going to die. I shouldn't have asked you for an interpretation. But he dies. And the other guy, he's like, you are going to get freed and you're going to go back to work with Pharaoh. And when you get there, remember me. right? Because I'm innocent, remember me. And so, all of that happens. And then a day goes by, and a week goes by, and 6 months go by, and Joseph sits in prison. 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream, a few dreams. And all their gods and all their people can't figure out these dreams. And all of a sudden, this guy's like, and it's so funny in the text, it's like, oh, forgive my shortcomings, O Majesty. I forgot. There was this guy. Okay? There was this guy who did interpret a dream. It was kind of a big deal in my life. My bad. So Pharaoh's like, get Joseph, get him here. So they clean him up, they shave him, they bring him up. And so Joseph has this moment 13 years later. Finally has a moment. He's in front of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh goes, okay, I've got some dreams. Can you interpret them? And he says, no. I cannot. But my God will. And I think I have read this story probably hundreds of times. I've heard this story probably thousands of times. We learned it in Sunday school endlessly. I've used it, I've preached it. But sometimes you read this and you just think, yeah, no, this makes sense. I don't know, guys, if I would be that faithful. You are 13 years in. Would your first turn still be to God? Could you still 13 years later view him as faithful? See, Joseph actually believed that God was somehow still with him in all of this. And because he believed that, he was like, well, I'm not going to sin against God then. That wouldn't make any sense. So instead of giving into bitterness, giving into anger, giving into everything else, he's like, no, I'm going to cling to God. Even if nothing changes. So, reading from Genesis 41, Joseph says to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. And again, it matters that what he's saying here because Pharaoh would have believed in multiple gods. There's all sorts of other gods and everything. So for Joseph to be very clear, no, you ought to understand the God, the only God. He's going to reveal it because he's decided what he's going to do. So this isn't like just a little debate. This is the guy who can chop your head off and you're telling him, oh, by the way, most of your gods are dead. They're not real. The living God is declaring this. The 7 good cows are 7 good years, and the 7 heads of grain are 7 years, and it is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east wind, they are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh, God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance of the land will not be remembered, because the famine it follows will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now, I know you didn't ask for my advice, but and now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food from the good years that are coming and store them up under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held for the country to be used for the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and all his officials, so Pharaoh asked him, can we find anyone like this man, one in whom this is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne am I greater than you. And so the things happened just like they said. So they had 7 years where the economy just flourished and bloomed, and everybody was raking it in, and they stored up a bunch of stuff, and they built storehouses. And then the 7 years of famine came. And then if you were to write a movie, you would start thinking about this. There's famine, only Egypt has money. There's going to be a moment, and that moment comes when finally the famine goes beyond Egypt, and the family of Joseph has to go to Egypt to get grain. And so you have this moment where the guys come in, and Joseph recognizes them. But they don't recognize him. And it says, and it's funny, he pretended he didn't know their language, which is awesome. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, because some of us don't look very German when you're in a store and somebody definitely speaking Low German, but they don't think you understand Low German. And you're just laughing, and then you say a Low German word, and they're just like, what in the world? Like, it's one of those moments where he's like, I understand what you're saying. You don't know I understand. So this really clear, this is them trying to figure some stuff out. And so really neat moment. Read the Bible. It's good. And so then Joseph, we're going to jump ahead. A couple chapters in 45. It says this. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all the attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. I don't know about you, before I read this, because most of you guys know this ending, a lot of you guys do, but would you be good? Like, you have suffered an insane amount because of these brothers. They sold you as a slave. You now are the second highest ranking person. And if you think you would respond well, I'm going to say, I think you have an arrogance problem. I don't know, outside of the power of God, how any human being could respond well in this moment. I don't know if you've been betrayed. I've only been like little betrayed, like little things. And even then I'm mad. Like, me and God talked about the Blue Jays. Like, we talked about this. Sorry. Last Blue Jay reference. Right, but you've been betrayed. You know what that feels like? Can you imagine being sold? And 13 years later, the people who sold you show up, and they're desperate, and you have all the power in the world. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. Oh man, the scriptures don't give you enough intensity. Can you imagine the intensity? Like, you ever been in a room where like you can just cut through the tension? Like, I guarantee you, these guys are like, well, I guess this is how we die. Right? And then Joseph's like, come close to me. And they're like, oh, no. Relax. Stay. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now I shall cut off your heads. Don't you sort of expect that that's what it would say? Like, come on. Can we be real for 2 seconds here? Like, we read this and we're like, oh yeah, you forgave your brothers. And now, do not be distressed, he says, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. It's humorous, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land. In the next 5 years, there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And so Joseph takes care of his family, and then after his father dies, you can see the brothers are still unsure, because this is what it says. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. See, if we can be honest, I think we have a tendency that whenever life is going well, we think God is with us. And whenever life isn't, we think God is left. But what if in the moments when it feels like everything is falling apart, when the marriage has dissolved, when the relationship has broken down, when everything around you seems to have failed, what if you could still cling to that even there God was with me? See, there's power to having that belief. If you have the right person with you, it changes things. So years ago, I had a bunch of different stories, but I figured it was a good time to tell. Remember our Mexico City trip. So Anita Dyke used to be a youth pastor, and I was a very, very young pastor at this point, and so I'd never taken anybody on a missions trip, and so I tried to figure out somebody mature enough to show me how to do this. And so Anita was working at Summers Corners Church, and so we decided to do a missions trip together. And so it was me, and it was Carlos Redekop and Monica Swatsky from this church, and then Dustin and Kija were from Yonseed back then. They were there, and there was a few others there. And so we fundraised. We did a big taco fundraiser. That's actually, it's a complete side note. This is where I learned not to put taco or ground beef, like the grease. We're not supposed to put it down the drain. I was at Summers Corners Church, and we were draining the oil to where it goes, and their secretary lost it on me. And that's where I learned, oh, okay. So lots of good life lessons in that moment. Completely unnecessary, but I was triggered back to that moment as I was talking about taco fundraiser. So we fly to Mexico City, and I don't know if you know anything about Mexico City, because I didn't. And I took your youth there. So for those parents who trusted me, you shouldn't have. So we went to Mexico City, and we landed, and this is totally true, and if you know me and my lack of details, you know this is accurate. We landed. I did not know where we were going to spend the night, but I believed Anita did. And so we loaded into vans, and it's about midnight in Mexico City in a land we haven't been to. And so we stopped by, I think we were the first people to be dropped off, me and Carlos, and we stopped by a house, and it had these beautiful gates and a wall, and then on top of the wall there was all these sharp things. And I thought, well, that's really strange decor. It was to prevent robbers, you know what I mean? Like the sharp things, it wasn't decor. It was a dangerous area. So anyways, they opened the gate, they let us in, they lead us to a room, and they're like, sleep. Okay. And then when we woke up, the people we were staying with didn't know English. And the Spirit did not give me tongues. And so it was a really intense moment as me, Carlos, and two Spanish people hung out in a land I'd never been to, in a place I was not sure. I got dropped off in a white van late at night at this house. Right? Reminds me of that joke. What kind of shoes do kidnappers wear? White vans, right? Sorry. But when I say it now, it's nuts. But Anita knew what she was doing. I did learn after I should have asked a few more questions. Some of my trust was maybe a little bit too highly placed. But all of those circumstances, all of the fear, all of the doubt was different because I'm like, Anita knew what she was doing. The impact of being with someone, right? It's the same as marriage. I don't know about you guys, but like at the end of the day, my favorite part of the day is when all the kids have gone to bed, and I love my kids, when they're finally out of the room and everything is done, and Joseph and I can just kind of collapse, and you kind of sit down and you take a breath and you go, all right, we finished another day. And no matter how good the day was, no matter how bad the day was, no matter what happened, I've got her. It's such an awesome part of the day. When we started fostering, we took a course from the agency presented on dealing with trauma, and they had pictures, and so I remember it. And so then you guys, nobody laughed. I was going to say you guys laughed, but you guys didn't. You guys were like, you should remember. But so anyways, it had pictures of the brain. And what it did was it said when you traumatize a child, it actually changes your brain. And so they showed the pictures of a kid who had gone through immense trauma, and it was different connections in the brain that weren't connected. And then it said, but if that person finds even one person who will fully believe in them, the brain will actually heal itself. You don't need a pile, you don't need specialists, you don't need all those things are good, but you need one person. And then it would show the brain afterwards. The power of one person, the power of knowing you're not alone. What if, in your moments, you could firmly believe that no matter what had happened, God was still with you? Jesus promised it, but Jesus also lived it out. So in John 19, it's a verse we didn't read the whole thing. I want to read a little bit further than this. So this is Jesus standing before Pilate. So John 19 from verse 1. It says, then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him and again saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." Then they slapped him in his face. Once more Pilate came out and the Jews gathered there. "Look, I am bringing him to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis or charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law, he must die," because he claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. And he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he said to Jesus. But Jesus gave no answer. "Do you refuse to speak?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have the power to either free you or crucify you?" And Jesus answered, "You have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. The only way you will crucify me is if God of the universe allows you to." You don't control my life. God does, because God is with me. And if you think you can crucify me, you're sadly mistaken. In Daniel, we read this story. A couple more stories. In Daniel 3, we'll go through it a bit quicker. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Great story. We'll go through it fast because I just did realize the time. So there's this king, King Nebuchadnezzar, and he's kind of proud of himself, and so he builds this big idol, big statue, and he gathers everybody together, including these three guys who were Israelite slaves. So Nebuchadnezzar had conquered Israel, and he had said, "Bring the best of the best and make them work for me." And so these were three of those guys. And so when all the musical instruments play, you're going to bow down to the statue. And so the musical instruments play, and everyone bows down except for these three. And so he gets a little angry. He's like, "Boys, I know there's a language barrier, but you understand, you bow when the music plays, okay?" "No." And they're like, "Okay, fine. Heat the furnace higher. You don't bow down, you're getting torched." So he throws them into the fire. It says, then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Hey, weren't those three men we just tied up and threw into the fire? There were just three though, right?" And they replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see four men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. The fourth looks like the Son of God." Nebuchadnezzar, then approaching the opening of the burning furnace, and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and everyone praised God. And when we read that story, we always get caught up in the cool ending. But it's what they said before they got thrown into the fire that I want to point out. They said to Nebuchadnezzar, they said, "You can throw us into that fire, but I need you to understand our God can rescue us. But even if he chooses not to, we're good. Because whether we die and go straight there, or whether he rescues us here, God is still with us. It changes your perspective when you start to remember that it is not the politicians or the great rich people or your boss or your spouse or all these other people who have the power in your life. It is God. And God is with you. So Jeremiah 25, really interesting. Listen to what God says about Nebuchadnezzar. So you got this crazy king, powerful. So in Jeremiah 25, it's written this way. He says, therefore, the Lord Almighty says this. So this was before Israel got taken by Nebuchadnezzar. It says, because you have not listened to my words, I summon all the peoples of the north and my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants and against all the surrounding nations. The way God sees Nebuchadnezzar is that is my servant. Maybe you wanted Pierre Poilievre to win, but God intended to use Mark Carney. What if it was God and his good plan who allowed Trump to get elected? Would it change the way you saw things? The way you post, the way you respond? What if God knew your spouse was going to leave? What if he knew that you were going to face that diagnosis? What if he knew that you would lose that job? What if he knew you would struggle? See, when we face those moments, we can blame God. Joseph had all the right. God, this is unfair, this is unjust, I did nothing to deserve this is garbage. You have the right, and at the end of that, you receive nothing. Blaming God and telling God you suck gives you nothing. You don't gain anything. But what if all the things that others intended for harm, God meant for good? What if you're on year 11 and by year 13, God is going to reveal how what he put you through was actually a part of his good plan? Joseph says, don't be afraid. Like, I'm not in the place of God. I need you to understand. I'm not in the place of God. You guys intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done. Your suffering isn't in vain. Your pain is seen. But if you ever want to be able to see God realized in every area of your life, you are going to have to, in those moments of suffering, end whatever sentence you have with, and yet God is with me. So this week I was trying to constantly, as I was going through different things, and we had some really highs and some really lows. And so I was constantly trying to, as the good times, being like, and God is with me, and it was awesome. And then our basement sprung a leak, and it was awesome because God was with me. It wasn't. I was angry. I was frustrated. And I was like, but this is one of those moments where you get to decide. I don't have the money to fix it right now. I don't even know how to fix it. I don't want to even fix it. I would like to rent so I could call somebody and be like, could you come deal with this? And so it was really interesting. I was sitting there in the basement staring at this stupid hole in the wall. And I was like, and yet God is with me. And when I went to visit Anita, God was with me. God was with her. When I chatted with people about their marriage and their struggles and their children, it changes it because God is with you. You have hope because God is with you. See, a lot of the conversations that we have, the reason they go so bad is because we feel like we're out of control. I'm scared for my country, so I panic and I have to find a way to get the right guy elected. I'm scared for my marriage. I'm scared for my children. I'm scared for my freedom. I'm scared for this. And we kind of put ourselves on a pedestal as if somehow we have the ability to, if I can just make the right decisions, if I can just do the right things, then my life will go as I please. But if we can be honest, my vision for the world goes about as wide as my grandkids. I just want good for my family, my friends, and that's as wide as it kind of goes. But God looks down and he says, look, I want to do something that's bigger than you. I want to do something that actually impacts eternity. Joseph, we're still talking about today. Paul, later on, the apostle, some of his most encouraging writings were while he was sitting in a prison cell. And today, we're still being encouraged by those. God wants to work through your good days. But I promise you, if you're very successful, very few people connect to that. But if you've failed, everyone connects. And so if this morning you're sick or you're suffering or you're struggling or you're hurt or you're depressed or you're anxious or you're whatever those things are, I promise you, if you can take the posture of, and yet God is with me, it creates the space for God to use that pain to further his mission. And maybe you won't see it today. Maybe you'll just get it in a rewind when you're in heaven and you look back and go, oh, I didn't even notice they were watching. I didn't even notice that the way I died, that person was encouraged. Or the way I suffered, that person was encouraged. But when the God of the universe is with you, it changes things. Let's pray. God, what a crazy thought to think that in this building that has been built by us and we have this technology and stuff and it just looks like all of us are there. It's a crazy idea to even believe that you could be here. And then you get to these moments, God, where we feel so scared and we feel so isolated and we feel so unsure and we don't know why you're not healing and we don't know why you're not restoring and we don't know why you're not helping it turn out the way we want it to turn out. And God, I plead with you that if nothing else this morning, God, I pray that you will just share with all of us, again, the reminder that you promised you would be with us. And that promise has not been broken. And so in our circumstances this week where we just struggle to understand why you would allow something, may those questions be drowned out by the reminder that the God who knows more, the God who loves bigger, and the God who cares more is the one who's in charge. And so God, may we take the posture of a servant before a loving God and say, God, how can you best use my life? Amen.